Welcome everybody to our webinar today on integrated user protection in the cloud. I just wanted to let you know we'll start our webinar in about 2 or 3 minutes. So if you just hold on for just a minute, wait for a few more people to get their software linked up, and then we'll begin our presentation. Thank you.
Hey, Alan.
All right. So it's about 3 minutes after. I'm going to begin here to make good use of everybody's time. I appreciate everybody tuning in today. We have today a presenter who is an engineer at Trend Micro, and he will give you his perception of what Trend Micro view of the cloud world. Somebody needs to be muted in the background. We need Roy or Suzanne. I think you might have your. We're getting feedback.
Daryl, you'll have to mute your line.
Daryl, maybe I can mute it. Let me see. There we go. I just got it. Okay, that should be muted. Okay. Anyway, so sorry about that technical issue. We'll get started now. So again, thanks for attending. And let me go here. So you're seeing second slide. There you go. All right. So anyway, so in preparation for this, I mean, we follow the market a lot, and obviously we're involved with security on a daily basis. And oh, by the way, I'm with eSecurity Solutions. I'm a CISO here and a certified auditor. And you know, we look at the cloud market a lot, and if you look at the threat vectors over time, what's interesting is, of course, it's a moving target, and anybody that's really heavily involved with security knows that every time the bad guys do something and they find a vulnerability, then the security companies and the security solution providers work on some kind of preventative mechanism to stop that, right? And we've evolved, the market evolved from very simple attacks to on endpoints and servers using static malware, with defenses with signatures and then behavioral solutions, and over time that's evolved to attack the gateway. Email and phishing and social engineering was an early threat vector and continues to this day. In fact, most of these threat vectors continue to this day. Maybe some of them are being de-emphasized a bit, but I mean, if you remember 3 or 4 years ago, APTs were all the rage, advanced persistent threats. And now you don't hear too much about that, but on the other hand, you do hear about threats that are multi-stage. So in reality, they're still occurring. Ransomware and zero-day attacks. Of course, ransomware was all the rage 2 or 3 years ago, still continues to be a threat. Zero-day malware continues to be a threat. And the emphasis on providing security at the endpoint has actually increased over the last 3 or so years because the ransomware has gotten a lot more aggressive, or the malware has gotten a lot more aggressive. I just wrote an article on our blog related to software supply chain attacks. That is one of the more recent attack vectors. Again, looking for low-hanging fruit, the criminals attempt to leverage trusted sources, right? Your software vendors and then get into the supply chain and introduce malware into, so that when you do a software update from a trusted supplier, then bad things happen. So, and then of course, really I would say for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been talking about cloud applications and cloud data centers and how the migration into the cloud is going to cause issues, and in fact extends your infrastructure. You can see some of the statistics on this slide. At least for mid-sized companies and enterprises, security and cloud computing are the number 1 and number 3 spend for those companies. So it's clearly an issue, and it really does go hand in hand. And if you look at what's happened to the infrastructures in companies, it's moved from centralized data centers where you know where your data is, which is basically on your servers, to outside data centers that are accessible through the cloud. We've got public and private cloud. Migration there is very heavy and very quick. And then, of course, the applications, the SaaS-based applications that are in the cloud, every single one of those introduces another vendor with additional access control issues, and we have data storage in those repositories at every single one of those locations that we now have to worry about, and those are all out of our control. And if you look at some of the statistics on cloud SaaS application usage at the enterprise, most of them, at least 60% of those, are migrating to very quickly to CASB or Cloud Application Security Broker solutions, because they see the value and they know the value in being able to get visibility of those applications that are out there, both sanctioned and unsanctioned, be able to protect them and protect against malware, to control the usage, both access as well as read-write access and granular access to who can do what and what provisions you provide to each individual here. And if you look at the statistics on that slide, you can see that even small offices have adopted Office 365 and some of the other applications, and it's just really a matter of time. And I would say at this point, there's got to be about 100% of SMBs, small businesses, that are using SaaS apps in some way. And if your company isn't one of those people, one of those companies, number one, you might be fooled into thinking that you don't, but in fact, there's unsanctioned apps being used by your employees. And secondly, in all likelihood, you probably are migrating to Office 365 or something like that, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I know for our company, almost everything now is being served up to us in SaaS format, and frankly, it's just so much easier to consume and so much easier to keep up to date. You're kind of foolish not to use it. And my point on this slide really is each application is storing data somewhere, right, that you don't control, and it's really providing access to data to anyone who has access, has a login to it, right? Because it's all accessible over the, from the cloud and over the internet. In terms of private and public cloud infrastructures versus, your own data centers and your own controlled cages or on-site, I mean, the transition there is happening quickly. We're going from maybe 40% public and private cloud, and this is, I think, more for enterprises, but I can't remember if it's across the board, if it's just enterprises. And traditional at 60%, and they're expecting that to reverse to be 60% private and public cloud. AWS is growing quickly. I mean, there's all these examples of how you can see it happening, and the spending is very aggressive. And more importantly, if you look at the surveys there for the people that are implementing this and the IT companies that are people that are implementing it, the top cloud challenge is security in their minds. Now, again, more sophistication at the enterprise level, more willingness to spend, but the realization is there, and over time, small and mid-sized businesses have to adopt those same kind of policies. And if you think about why it isn't being adopted more quickly, I mean, frankly, I kind of ask that question on a regular basis, because if you think about it, using cloud applications or cloud data centers, pretty much every company is at risk, right? We're in increased risk. That the cloud presents new vulnerabilities, And those applications are accessible to everybody with a username and password, which can be captured in many ways. Criminals look for the weakest link always, right? So when you talk about that chart that I showed on the first slide, it continues to migrate. They always migrate to the lowest hanging fruit, and that's why we're seeing software supply chain attacks and fewer iterations of new zero-day malware, because frankly it's easier for them to attack in certain areas, and that's where they're going to go. And ultimately they'll come back and they'll find other ways to generate more nasty malware as well. The cloud vendors themselves, as partners, present risk themselves, right? The usage and the threats are growing. The visibility in the cloud, which is why CASB solutions have become popular, is poor. So you don't know of your employees who's using what. You don't necessarily know what unsanctioned apps are being used. And that's very important to get your arms around. So as our infrastructure goes from inside of our building to the World Wide Web, we need to get our arms around everything that applies to us, and everywhere our data is stored and everywhere that our users can go, whether they be internally or externally, and where they access the data. You still have to be able to control that data. You still have to know who's accessing it. That's a very important thing, and I just don't think we can continue to ignore this as over time. So in terms of what we're going to do about it, I mean, from our point of view, you got to, you start with risk assessments, because until you get your arms around exactly where all your data is and who's accessing it and what's critical to you, and what controls are really in place, that I don't know how you define a strategy. I'm not sure how you can prioritize a plan. And then following all of that, you've got to implement both the preventative solutions, the detection or the monitoring type solutions, and then you have to monitor, manage, and adjust. Now that, as it turns out, that's the business we're in, right? We're in the business of helping our customers with those kinds of solutions and going through that process and adjusting to the changes in the threats in the world. We provide advisory consulting, we do risk assessments, we provide managed security, we provide products, and we also provide services. And we have an eye toward compliance and regulations, because many people now, most companies are being held directly to be compliant with regulations or indirectly from their customers. And I just also did another article a couple of weeks ago on the California new privacy regulations that are mimicking GDPR. And so we're seeing more and more regulations that apply to everybody, and it's getting pretty hard to escape all of that. So that's really my lead into the topic. I'd like to switch to Roy, and let's see if I can do that. Here we go. There we go, Roy. All right, hopefully this is going to show Roy's screen. So Roy, are you loading up?
Yeah, I'm here. It's muted. Yep, I'm loading up right now. So you can see a black screen at this time. All right, just a black screen, right?
Yep.
Bear with me. So get my screen situated. All right, let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it.
Perfect. Tom, Allie, first off, thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing me a few minutes of time to speak with you, with the security and your clients. And I hope that working with you along with this in this webinar, we can shed some light on some of the existing things that are happening in cybersecurity, in the world of security. Before we get started too much into the actual protection in the cloud, I want to go over some of the what the threat landscape looks like. At Trend, we always do predictions every single year of what it's going to look like. We have various areas that we focus on, that we're looking at, that's coming across the wire. There's a couple of these that I'm really going to focus on as far as the threat landscape goes from this screen, which is going to be number one, ransomware. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. As well as the number three, which is the business email compromise. We have other things like cyber propaganda, which is basically a lot of fake news and then, of course, with GDPR coming out in May, it's just ever growing. It's getting more and more complex. And Allie, if you don't mind, go ahead and share in the chat window that link that I sent you. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so attackers, they are banking on network vulnerabilities and inherent weaknesses to make such headway in business that lack any kind of appropriate protections that they have or the lack of. Cybersecurity, the challenge that we have today in cybersecurity is that threats are continuously shifting and traditional security solutions are unequipped to address the landscape complexities. This is how it's happening right now in 2018, and it's going to constantly be evolving various threats that require the right security at the right time. You'll hear me say this once or a couple more times in here, but ransomware is not expected to go away anytime soon. So while its success is driven to drive digital extortion campaigns, connected devices will be manipulated for criminal activities. Enterprise apps will be targeted for protection sabotage as well. There are some shifts in the security paradigm that will dictate how we should strategize for 2018 and beyond. The ransomware business model will still be a cybercrime mainstay in 2018 and beyond as well. But there's other forms of digital extortion that are gaining more ground as well. Ransomware families are usually identified by its ransom note uniqueness. So the rest of the behaviors like encrypting files, data demanding payment via Bitcoin, showing ransom notes, locking access to desktop screens, and etc., are just some of the basic in all of the ransomware that's out there. Before 2015, there was only a handful of ransomware encrypted files and data. Most of the ransomware back then were simple lock screens like fake AV. Many of you have experienced fake AV. But then when we start moving forward, so towards the end of 2015 and all of 2016 and 17 until now, almost all ransomware are encrypting files. There's only a handful that were discovered as the lock screens, like the fake AV. Almost all ransomware demand Bitcoin as a payment. Very few are trying the old-fashioned credit card route that used to be. So let's go back to 2017. What was new back then? Well, the ability to spread via vulnerabilities spreading or a worm-like capability has been observed in 2016, but none came to WannaCry's level. Machine learning evasion is growing. A server ransomware version was found to have machine learning evasion capability just built right within its code. So as ransomware was big in 2017, with both the WannaCry and the Pecha outbreaks, which ensnared hundreds and hundreds of thousands of computers and disrupted many, many business operations around the globe, the massive infection campaigns have only proved how ransomware can be a big threat to enterprises, regardless of size. Some of these are not even targeting the big enterprises. Some of them are focusing on the SMB, and I will speak to that here in just a couple minutes. But the cyber criminals, the hackers, they see ransomware not only as malware, but also as a business model that can be afforded through our ransomware as a service instead of software, but it's ransomware as a service in the underground forums. Also, Bitcoin, additionally, is seen as a very secure method for criminals to get their hands on their payouts. So this year, 2018, given the success of ransomware infection campaigns, cyber criminals will look to make potential hefty payouts in other forms of infection. They can either target many users and ensnare that, a sufficient amount or percentage of the infection, possibly like through phishing attacks, or what they'll also do is target a single organization or a single company, which will stand to lose a lot more if attacked. Pardon me. And then we also see, in the previous slide that I had up there, we also see that there's the Gdpr, the enforcement where private data covered by the regulation could mean huge, huge fines if breached. According to the FBI, another one is BEC, or Business Email Compromise. scams. They have reported to be in over 100 different countries and had a huge increase of 2,370% in identified exposed losses between January 2015 and 2016. So we also predict that the continuing incidents are going to grow this year in 2018, which will lead to over $9 billion in global losses. That number is going to be brought on by the growing awareness that's around BEC tactics and the increased reporting of the scams. So also, BEC will continue to bank on phishing approaches, from impersonating your C-level execs in the form of a CEO fraud, using PDFs or .txt files in sites where we'll see more BEC attempts in the years ahead. I know of one personally in China that with a BEC fraud that took place. I believe the CEO was actually traveling at the time, and there was a email that came through to wire transfer $20 million. It looked just like it was his. That transfer went through, and the company was out $20 million because of a business email compromise scam. So, I mentioned this a little bit a couple slides ago. There is no business that's too small to evade a cyber attack or a data breach. 50% of the SMBs in the U.S. have been breached in the past year. 33% of them are using cloud application, and that number is actually growing substantially day by day. And of course, the number one concern is ransomware and phishing attacks. This quote is great. Hackers love small businesses because they don't have the resources to put in high-end cybersecurity. They may not be consciously aware that they are a target. To me, this slide speaks volumes. 94% of ransomware comes through email, and we now know that cyber criminals see ransomware as a huge, profitable business model. But this has not been a quick or a sudden shift. So if we trace back to more than a decade ago, hackers and cyber criminals, they were utilizing and wielding these info stealers to hijack banking transactions. So back in 2008, we saw these threats disguised as anti-malware solutions in the form of fake AV, which duped so many users into paying up to regain access to their infected computers. So this behavior is very similar to what we've known as ransomware. Trend Micro's layered defense provides a holistic approach that provides protection at the email gateway, as well as the endpoint, in the network, and at your server workloads, or if you have AWS, your instances in the cloud. The multi-layered approach begins with the email and web protection. So for organizations that are using Office 365, we have Cloud App Security, which augments its built-in security to include malware scanning and file risk assessment, Sandbox malware analysis, document exploit detection, as well as web reputation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as the endpoint protection, which is, we call it Trend Micro Worry-Free Services. And what that has included is technologies like behavior monitoring, application control, machine learning, DLP, or data loss prevention. And then we have server protection as well, and that's what we call our Trend Micro Deep Security, which can protect critical data stored either in your physical, your virtual, and your cloud servers. And with suspicious activity detection and prevention, utilizing vulnerability shielding as well as lateral movement detection, or in other words, east and west detection in your environment. BEC can be deflected if an employee training is in place. To me, employee training is critical, and this is a best practice that so many corporations and companies overlook. But aside from implementing the very strict protocols on internal processes, companies need to have top-notch social engineering detection and email correlation to easily spot the social engineering emails and malwares that are used in BEC attacks. So with Trend Micro, we have solutions that detect the spear phishing emails by correlating the email components such as the header, the body, the network routing piece, the heuristics, sandboxing, and email reputation technologies all built together. I like to utilize this slide. I know I've already mentioned this about the prediction of the $9 billion in cumulative losses, but to me, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Because cyber criminals, what they do is they use the following deceptive techniques. One, they use a sense of urgency. It's a request for action or financial implication that's used in DEC schemes to trick targets into falling for the trap. For instance, the one that I mentioned just a few minutes ago about the $20 million loss in China. So, for instance, what's going to happen is a cyber criminal contacts either the employees and or the executives of the company, and they pose as either a third-party supplier, representatives of law firms, or even chief executive officers or CEOs, and they manipulate the targeted employees or executives in secretly handling and transferring the funds. A second way is fake email, which is made to appear legitimate, and some of these emails are very legitimate. Cyber criminals will play into the employee's desire to be responsive to the executives that are being impersonated. The most targeted positions in the past year were the CFOs or the chief financial officers, the finance controllers, finance managers, and finance directors, while the most spoofed high-level executives were CEOs and managing directors, as well as presidents of companies. And thirdly, when a user's email account or mailbox is compromised, the attacker can actually use the compromised account to send internal phishing or BEC emails. So since the email is coming from a legitimate user's mailbox, there won't be anything suspicious in the mail header or in the sender address. This is a great example of a CEO fraud. The scam email looks like it's sending from the CEO, but it replies to someone else outside the organization. So there's a couple of different CEO fraud-based attacks that the tricksters actually use. Type 1 is the email address is named generally and usually contains CEO or executive in terms, and this is utilizing a free domain, free email domain. The second type is a bit more deceptive, and the email address is named exactly equal to the CEO name with a customized or similar domain. So, for instance, if this is abccompany.com, this might be at abdcompany.com. So we have an ever-changing IT environment and customer demands, along with all these threats, this huge landscape that's going on. The enterprise boundary is now gone. It's basically eroded, and it's extended by three main challenges facing organizations today. The rapid adoption of virtualization and cloud has made it even more difficult than ever to effectively and efficiently protect information in the modern data center. I believe Tom's already referred to this, but by 2022, cloud workloads are going to overtake traditional IT, and that source is from VMware. The next way, networks today are much more complex. Not only do today's network extend far beyond the traditional LANs and WANs with Wi-Fi and remote access, but networks are becoming software-defined as well, which makes it even more difficult than ever to rely on the traditional perimeter defenses. Ultimately, network communications need to be protected, not just what's coming in and out of your environment or the north-south, but also the east and west, which means lateral movement within the networks must be detected to ultimately protect information that's in the data center. And finally, users continue to demand the use of technologies and applications that they want to use. So this creates a consumerization of IT, and it's making it very difficult for IT to maintain control over activities. Consumerization has increased the breadth of applications and devices that can be used to establish a beachhead within the enterprise network that can be used to attack the data center. It's not just about what the users want. IT is also driving a change with the huge increased use of SaaS-based applications like Google and picture here as well as Office 365 or O365, which makes it easier for them to maintain and for users to access their data from anywhere, especially with our huge remote workforce that we have today. So why supplement the security included Office 365? I'm going to jump into this here in just a little bit, but what I want to focus on right now is the fine print here in Office 365 with their anti-malware protection, which is using multiple anti-malware engines. Exchange Online offers multi-layered protection that's designed to catch all known malware. Last month I was going through several articles and stuff on Gartner. I found this quote and I thought this was astounding, that through 2022, at least 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault, and that's per Gartner. Jay Heiser, who's a research VP at Gartner, he said CIOs need to ensure their security teams are not holding back cloud initiatives with unsubstantiated cloud security worries. Exaggerated fears can result in lost opportunity and inappropriate spending. Also, something else, guys, the CIOs must change their line of questioning from, is the cloud secure? Because we've actually moved on beyond that question. Now, the question is, am I using the cloud securely? A couple quotes here with analyst insights and recommendations. Cloud workloads have different requirements for security than end-user facing endpoints, and the adoption of hybrid private public cloud computing models compound the differences. Second quote is, require vendors to support the security and visibility of workloads that span physical, virtual, and multiple public cloud infrastructure as a service, all from a single policy management framework and console. So let's jump in right now to protecting the endpoint. In Trend Micro, we have worry-free services. This is a hosted cloud-based endpoint SaaS solution. We've got a management console that's in the cloud, and deploy and install an agent on the endpoint. All of this is maintained by Trend. And so with all other SaaS solutions, you as the client don't have to worry about maintaining the servers, the updates, etc. We take care of that for you. The platforms that we support are Windows and Mac, as well as iOS and Android devices. Also, a lot of people, and I still hear this today, even though Trend Micro this year has been in business for 30 years, a lot of people only see Trend Micro as an antivirus company, but we are so much more. We do everything from anti-malware to ransomware to DLP, all the way to machine learning and so many other technologies that we utilize to build upon to give you the right protection at the right time. There's other features as well with Active Directory support, multiple admins, and etc. So in real simple, I like this slide because worry-free services, that protects you with the endpoint. Worry-free services advanced, that's both the endpoint and email. So from this point on, I'm just going to focus right now on the worry-free services advanced and talk to you about hosted email security. This is our email spam and virus gateway. Basically, if you have a Exchange Online, or maybe you have an Exchange on-prem, all you have to do is point your record, which is called the MX record, from your Exchange server, your mail server, to hosted email security, and everything will filter through that. With hosted email security, that includes a cloud sandbox and email encryption, which are there's no additional cost for that. And like I said, it doesn't matter if your servers are on-prem or if it's in Office 365. It makes no difference. You point it to there. Then from that, it can trickle into our second part of the worry-free services advanced, which is called Trend Micro Cloud App Security. What this does is it uses the advanced techniques to find threats, including document exploit detection, like Advanced Threat Scan Engine, or ATSE for short. This looks for malware that's hidden in Office files. It has web reputation, which examines the URLs both in the body of the email and also within the attachments, because what's happening is criminals these days are now sending phishing emails with a URL in the attachment so that it can bypass the security filters, which only look at the URLs in the message of the body. There's also true file type blocking. This looks at header information instead of just the file extensions, because what the hackers can do is they can basically change a .exe file to a JPEG to fool the built-in blocking within Office 365. There's also Sandbox malware analysis, which will open up suspicious files in a virtual sandbox, or in this case, we have several virtual sandboxes. And what it will do is it'll actually observe the actual behavior to find out if this is a zero-day malware, which is basically a malware that's never, ever been seen before and not caught with pattern matching techniques. Cloud app security is completely delivered, once again, as a cloud service to protect your Exchange Online, your SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and it integrates directly with service-level integration with Office 365 using their APIs. I like this slide because previously I showed you the highlighted of what Microsoft Office 365 does. They block the known threats that are coming into the environment. But what Trend Micro has done is we've worked directly with Microsoft in their Office 365 product. And so along with that, with Cloud App Security, we, in 2017, blocked an additional 2.9 million known threats. But that's not where it stops. We also detected and blocked 500,000 additional more threats in 2017, utilizing exploit detection, machine learning, sandbox analysis, for a total of 3.4 million high-risk threats that were blocked by Trend Cloud App Security before the users even accessed their emails. Within that, there was 50,000 of ransomware, 190,000 phishing email, and 3,000 business email compromise that we were able to detect and block. If you're interested in this, we do have a report on this, and you can get with Tom and Allie at the end of the webinar, and we can make sure you get that report. So protection in the data center. What I want to talk about now is Trend Micro's Deep Security product. And every journey to the cloud is different. I've been in IT for almost 2 decades. I've been working with Trend Micro products for almost 8 years. I remember back when it was Exchange 5.5, the file server, etc. All we had were physical servers, but the landscape has changed tremendously. In fact, now 75% or more of the server workloads are virtualized, and that's per Gartner. 87% are using the public cloud. So the speed of change in the data center with virtualization, it was absolutely unprecedented. And that the promise that the virtualization would only lower costs and drive consolidation didn't end up that way. Virtualization has changed the mentality of the IT organization so much to a point where there's now more servers than ever before, all in support of all these new business initiatives that keep popping up. Because of this unimaginable environment, the idea of simply using a legacy software security in the data center just does not work there, nor in the cloud. Many of you are familiar with this, but I want to go over this for a second. This is the shared responsibility model that the cloud providers use. So, for instance, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. The cloud provider is responsible for basically layers 1 through 3. They're responsible for your compute, your network, and your storage. They're responsible for the security of the physical security of accessing the servers, as well as maintaining and updating all the hardware that they utilize for the cloud. However, that stops at layer 3. You as the client are responsible for layers 4 through 7. So basically, you're responsible for what you put in the cloud, the operating systems, the various content and applications. And this is where Trend Micro Deep Security can step in and help you protect your cloud environments. So talk about SMART for just a second. It's a unique blend of cross-generational threat defense techniques that are fueled by this massive global threat intelligence community that we have here at Trend. Anti-malware continues to be enhanced and critical for eliminating the high volume of known good as well as known bad. behavior analysis, which includes memory inspection and suspicious action monitoring. This examines an unknown item as it's being loaded and looks for suspicious behavior in the OS, in the applications, and in the scripts, and how they interact to block them. And the machine learning and how it's evolved, this guy is absolutely critical to help with detecting threats like ransomware. And then there's Sandbox analysis for on-the-fly analysis of the advanced threats, which allows them to run in a safe environment to examine their behavior. IPS, and I may say this again, but with deep security, this is my favorite piece of it. This protects against vulnerabilities. It instantly shields vulnerable applications and servers with what is called a virtual patch or virtual patching until you and your team have the time to be able to go through and patch those machines. With IPS, we already have over 6,000 roles available that work with virtual patching to protect you and your environment. And then there's application control and integrity monitoring. And basically what this does is this locks down systems, and this will identify suspicious changes that are happening within these servers. We want to remove this security complexity, and Trend Micro has worked diligently with VMware, with AWS, with Azure, as well as several other platforms to be the security partner to protect you and your environment. Containers. This is a growing area, and deep security can protect customers who have CI/CD, or basically what that is, continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines of microservices that are going to production through runtime protection. So as companies move forward, releasing faster and more frequently, deep security expands its ability to accelerate the compliance for microservices-based outcomes. So there's no need for container protection point solutions, because we understand that our clients have a mixture of applications of very different maturities at any time, and deep security can protect all of them. I'll say this again: it will protect you at the physical, the virtual, the cloud, and the container level. And this works with, like you saw on the previous screen, with the various leading container platforms and orchestration tools like Docker or Chef, Puppet, Ansible. And we've also worked diligently to remove any kind of platform support issues. We, of course, support Windows platforms, but on top of that, we support about 19 flavors of Linux. And of course, within those 19 flavors of Linux, you're going to have thousands of various kernels that are rapidly updated, and we support all of that, as well as Solaris. So, automation's evolving. Automation has solved customer pain points. It reduces risk. It lowers the operational cost as well. And Trend Micro, we delivered a broad range of security controls that can be deployed at the host. So this enables the security to be completely context-free. So, for example, you have the ability, to apply specific policies and controls for web servers, which may have different policies and controls based on how they are hosting. So figuring out what controls to put in place can also be made easier with the ability to scan a system for environmental specifics, as well as potential existing vulnerabilities, and to protect that with the built-in security capabilities found in the platform. So what I'm trying to say here is this is extremely important, and that one-size-fits-all security just does not work in the cloud. Another area of concern is compliance. This will drive security needs. Now, whether it's a global requirement like PCI, or maybe there's some regional regulations in California you have to abide by, or wherever you're located. But having a broad platform that you can easily deploy controls where and when needed helps to streamline the compliance. I believe I mentioned this, but I want to make sure I verify this. Deep security can automatically detect new servers. It doesn't matter if it's vCenter, AWS, Microsoft Azure, vCloud Air, and even Active Directory. because automation is enabled by having context and knowing what workload and applications in your environment and knowing what rules and policies apply to that information. When we leverage these integrations, it's made possible with the APIs, so we can understand what exactly is running in your environment. And then securing business transformation. I like this slide because it's so simple. It really simplifies what deep security can do for you in your environment. When we look here on the left, this is a on-prem data center. On the right is your cloud infrastructure. And as you can see, we've got servers in the cloud seem to go up and down quite a bit more. But with deep security, it's a single security management console, and you can see completely across your entire environment. And this removes so many of the security complexity across all of these systems. One last thing I want to hit on before I'm through is best practices. I know you hear that a lot, probably from various people, but best practices, it's sustained protection for end users, having different devices and applications to access information is becoming second nature in today's increasingly connected world. First, change default passwords. Using unique and complex passwords for the various smart devices, especially for routers, which is one thing that's overlooked a lot, which this will significantly reduce the possibility of attackers hacking into the devices. Set up devices for security. Modify those devices' default settings to keep privacy in check and implement encryption to prevent unauthorized monitoring and use of data. Apply timely patches. Update the firmware to its latest version. Or sometimes there's an option to actually enable the auto update feature if that's available. This will avoid unpatched vulnerabilities as well. Deflect social engineering tactics. Always be mindful of emails received and sites visited, as these can be used for spam or phishing or malware or various targeted attacks. And then last but not least is end user training. Train. Continuously end user training will help boost security, surprisingly. I've seen it many times where the end users were trained once, maybe when they got hired, weren't after that. They lost context, they lost sight, and they were hit extremely hard. But enterprises and users are better positioned if protections are in place, are able to cover the entire threat lifecycle with multiple security layers, from the email and web gateway to the endpoint, all the way to cloud security. Having a connected threat defense ensures maximum protection against the constantly evolving threats of 2018 and beyond. And with that, got a list of resources if you're interested in. And that's all I have for now. Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Roy. I appreciate that. A great overview. You covered a lot of territory, obviously. What I would ask now is if there's any questions, there's a question box. You can enter them into the box. I would also say that I believe Ali told me that we have a drawing for a gift card, and I think the Trend Micro people would actually like to send you some kind of a gift or something. And in order to do that, we need to have your address, I guess. So if you entered it, great. If we have it, great. If you don't and you want a gift, then send that to us. You have Ali's contact. If you have any questions, go and enter them now. Otherwise, I will say we will follow up with you to see if there's anything we can help you with. I know that this is a problem for everybody because it's not just cloud data centers, but it's cloud applications, and it's very confusing. But I will tell you this: if we don't, as a set of organizations, if we don't treat our distributed network, which we now have, with the same level of rigor as we would if it was all inside of our building, then there will be issues. And one of the things I saw with ransomware was it woke everybody up to say we need better security, especially at the endpoint. In actuality, that prompted better gateway security, a bunch of advanced malware solutions. The same thing can happen and will happen with cloud security and breaches that we're going to see in the future. And I'd hate to see that be the wake-up call we all need. So if we can do some preventative things, which start with a good risk assessment, that's going to help everybody. So anyway, thanks for attending. We're going to sign off here, and again, we'll contact you and follow up and see how things are going. Thank you very much.